After all these years, what are you still salty about? Story 1. Long, long ago, when I was probably 5 to 6 years old, we had an Atari 2600, and my favorite game was Asteroids. I was pretty good at it too. I remember one Sunday morning before church, I was killing it at Asteroids, and my dad was cheering me on. My mom came in and started flipping out about how we'd be late for church. My dad said, "The kid's almost to 1,000,000 points, just leave him be." My mom actually listened to my dad, and even though she and my little sister were impatient, they let me keep playing. Do you know what happens when you get to 1,000,000 points on Asteroids on the Atari 2600? The score rolls back over to 0. I was crushed. I spent the entire church service bawling my eyes out. It was my first lesson on the basic unfairness of life, and now, 34 plus years later, it still sticks with me. Story 2. This trivia quiz that I was a part of took place at a nearby social club. When I was 8 years old, I was the kid on my team, and our team was tied with another one for the top prize. The quizmaster said, "Now you folks need to sit down quietly. Just raise your hands if you know the answer to this tiebreaker question. Don't just shout it out." He asked the question. I knew the answer. I raised my hand. Someone on the other team shouted out the answer instead. They got the points and won. No one even stopped to look at me. Someone asked me what the question was. It was, 2nd October is celebrated as Mahatma Gandhi's birthday all over India. But which other prominent leader was also born on the same day? The answer, as most Indians will know, is Lal Bahadur Shastri, the second Prime Minister. Story 3. I have a mom friend, but our kids don't play together anymore because I am convinced her son is a budding psycho. He would come over to play with our kids and purposely break toys. He took all our kids' Lego figures and pulled their heads, bottoms, and hats off and threw them around our basement. We're pretty sure he took a bunch home, as we can't find about 10 of them. We went to a water park with each other, and their son vanished. We were all yelling and running everywhere looking for him. We were in the middle of making the place go into lockdown when he popped out from hiding. He was hiding the whole time, watching his parents freak out. The breaking point for me was this. We used to walk our kids to the library together. I pushed my youngest in a stroller because the hills in our neighborhood are too much for her little legs. One day, her son asks if he can push my kid. I tell him sure, but be careful. He takes off with the stroller, running full speed up a hill. We are yelling for him to stop, and he's laughing, not slowing down at all. He reaches the top of the hill, stops running, and shoves my stroller with the toddler inside it down the hilly road. Thank God the stroller veered left and hit the curb and didn't speed down the hill through the busy intersection. I was done after that. The other mom thinks I'm super uptight and that her kid is an angel. Ugh. Story 4. I was at a golf tournament in high school and had just bought some expensive Pro V1 balls for the first time ever. I was practicing on putting the green with 3 of them when I saw a kid pick up one of my balls. I approached him and said, "That's my ball," but he replied, "No, it's mine." There was no convincing this kid that it was mine, so I just angrily let him have it. We ended up playing in the same group that day, and when he hit it into the rough, which was easily findable with little effort, I made sure to stomp it deep down into the ground so he couldn't see it. Then, when he had to re-tee and take the penalty stroke, I walked back to the spot and picked up the ball. I'm still salty at that kid to this day, and I don't know why. Story 5. In 8th grade, my math teacher graded our homework, which we went over together in class. I completely messed up a concept we had just learned, resulting in me getting every homework question wrong. I told my teacher this, but she said something to the effect of, "Too bad, you should have done it correctly, take the 0. About a month later, we started another new concept, and I made sure every question was answered correctly. Upon grading the homework, a classmate of mine said something to the effect of, "Miss Last Name, I got every question wrong because I messed up the concept." The math teacher then said, "Don't worry about it, I won't grade today's homework." This was the first and only time she didn't grade our homework. Story 6. My God, I had an interview at a company, and it was such a colossal waste of time. First, I had to fill out a long application form where they asked me to write literal essays about what I would do in certain situations. This one application form took at least an hour to fill out. Then they asked me for work samples, scheduled me for a half-hour phone interview, and called me in for in-person interviews that took 2 hours. Then they gave me another test that repeated some of the same questions from the initial application, which took another 1.5 hours, and they didn't even provide me with lunch. They literally had me doing this through lunch. Then they had me fill out another form, which took maybe another half hour. All this for an entry-level position. That's the most ridiculous interview process I've ever had, and I've interviewed at several other places after. Why is it that some companies feel the need to put you through a ridiculous application ordeal for a non-essential position where other companies go through a phone screen and an hour-long interview with sample works? Story 7. Once, my third-grade teacher was asking us about state abbreviations. She got to Florida, and I raised my hand and said FL. She told me I was wrong, and that it was FA. And at the time, I thought teachers were infallible, so I took her word for it. Fast forward to 6th grade geography, state abbreviations come up, and I write FA on a quiz, which turned out to be wrong, obviously. I was so mad at my third-grade teacher for misleading me, and to be honest, it's something I think about more often than I should. Story 8. We used to play Candyland all the time at the babysitter's. One time, I drew the Snow Queen card, but the babysitter said it's too early for that card, and made me put it back in the deck and draw again. However, her daughter drew the Snow Queen card a few turns later, and the babysitter lit up like, "Ooh, Snow Queen," and moved her piece. Even though I was only 4 years old, I will never forget that moment. Story 9. I took an amazing job opportunity that increased my salary by $40K a year, but it was an at-will contract. Just 30 days after I started, I was called into HR, told that they were letting me go, and offered no explanation because they weren't required to. I still get angry just thinking about it because I have no idea what I did or didn't do, and was not given any specifics. Although I eventually found another job with a similar salary in a lower cost of living area, I am still bitter about getting fired without an explanation. Story 10. The year was 1998, and I was in 8th grade at the Wizard World Comic Con in Chicago. My dad drove me the 8 hours there for the weekend, and I was ecstatic. At that time, I was a huge Kevin Smith fan, and I had brought the Clerks comics that I wanted him to sign since he was going to be at the show. I got in line on Saturday, and after waiting for 4 hours and getting close to the front, the signing was cut off. I was devastated because I had spent my whole day waiting for this. The organizers gave out stickers to people in line saying we'd get to go to the front of the line on Sunday, but on Sunday, they decided not to honor them. I had to wait at the end of the line, and I was heartbroken because I had waited months for this. Later, while walking behind the convention center with my dad, I saw Kevin Smith leaning against a wall smoking. Although I didn't want to bother him, I blurted out, "Oh my God, you're Kevin Smith." He replied, "You're goddamn right I am," and went back to his cigarette. Although I had that encounter, I'm still bitter about not getting my stuff signed. It's only been 20 years, so maybe I'll get over it eventually. Story 11. I entered a competition where you had to be the first to type the lyrics to Auld Lang Syne. I did it first, with seconds to spare, but was disqualified for not using the correct lyrics. Apparently, they wanted the Americanized lyrics, but I'm Scottish, and the song is Scottish. Every time I think about it, I can't help but feel angry. Story 12. A few years ago, I ordered the shrimp and chicken gumbo at the Cheesecake Factory. It wasn't until a few minutes into my entree that I noticed they had forgotten to add the shrimp. When we told our waitress, she started accusing me of having eaten all the shrimp and was being very abrasive. She didn't replace the order or bring out any shrimp. A few minutes later, we heard someone from a nearby table complaining to the same waitress and demanding their gumbo be remade because they asked for no shrimp. It was pretty obvious the waitress got our orders mixed up, but nope. The only logical explanation was that I picked out and ate all the shrimp and was only complaining to get my meal comped. I still can't go back. Story 13. When I was a senior in high school, I wanted to be a National Honor Society officer. I was also in the marching band. The lady who was in charge of the NHS was also the librarian, and I spent my 5th period every day working in the library. Because I was already in the NHS, she had me helping her do a bunch of stuff that an officer should have been doing. Organizing records, keeping track of everyone's service hours, etc. When it came time to choose officers for the following year, I thought, hey, I'm a shoo-in, right? I've literally already been doing the job. Nope, she decided not to let me be an officer because she didn't think someone in the band could have the time to really perform the duties, even though I'd been doing it for 6 months. It turned out she had some vendetta against the band because she thought we got too much special treatment. Story 14. During dinner time as a child, around 6 to 9-ish, my 3 siblings and I would have to finish our plates, then ask our mom for permission to leave the table, presumably to go do some dumb 6-year-old stuff. One time we had pasta and tuna, my favorite, so I wolfed it down in record time, strolled into the living room with my head held high and my chest puffed out to inform my mother that it was time for me to be excused to go play Cool Spot on the Sega Mega Drive. As she followed me back into the dining room, my plate was miraculously full of pasta, and my older brother's was completely spotless. Despite my pleading for her to see reason, My brother got to go upstairs and claim the Mega Drive for himself, and I had to sit through another helping of inedible pasta, since he had diabolically covered it in enough salt to dry up my tears. I later found out that he had paid off my younger brother and sister to back him up with the promise of listening to his new Busted CD. To this day, I feel as though I harbor resentment towards him for his betrayal. Story 15. In elementary school, we had a colored card system for discipline, where the green card meant good behavior, the yellow card meant talking or misbehaving, and the red card meant severe misbehavior that would warrant calling parents. I often found myself on the yellow card due to my constant talking. One day, I asked to go to the bathroom and returned to find that the teacher had flipped everyone's card to red because the whole class was being disruptive. To my surprise, I received a red card as well. I was outraged and my parents were called. Even now, my mother still talks about how angry I was about it, even though it happened in first grade 20 years ago. Story 16. At work, my boss convinced me to take on a project in addition to my regular job, promising me a promotion to the position I wanted. I worked hard on the project for several months, ignoring rumors about my boss having an affair with his secretary. When the project was completed, my boss took all the credit for it and promoted his secretary to the position he had promised me. It turned out the rumors were true. I was so angry that I immediately started looking for a new job and put in my 2 weeks' notice by the end of the month. During those 2 weeks, my boss avoided me. When asked what I would say to him, I replied that I couldn't wait for his wife to find out about the affair and kick him out. As it turned out, that was exactly what happened. And every time I see his ex-wife driving his brand new truck around town, I chuckle to myself. Story 17. When I graduated high school, my grandma's health was starting to go downhill. She was basically in a wheelchair 24/7 and was just overall not doing well. Now, my grandma and I were super close, so I went through the special arrangements of getting tickets for her to sit at the bottom part of the arena when I was graduating, so she wouldn't have to take the stairs and such. Come graduation day, only my mom and my 2 aunts came. We didn't go to dinner like everyone else. And overall, it was not as exciting as the youngest grandchild graduating. My sister didn't even go, but she watched the live stream, so I can give her credit there. 2 weeks later, when my cousin graduated, everyone went. 2 aunts from out of state, my 2 local aunts, grandma got to go, etc. They went out to dinner, etc. It's been 4 years and I'm still mad. I will never not be salty about this. My family is actually pretty darn good, but in this instance, they really sucked. I don't have a dad. He died when I was 2. His side of the family has also never had anything to do with me since he died. So this leaves me with a rather small family. Graduation was kind of a big deal to my mother, since my sister didn't go to hers. My mom made it a big deal, got me a cake and a nice present. I already knew then I wasn't going to have a graduation party like most of my friends. So she thought my 2 aunts, who have been like second mothers to me, would make it a big deal. They didn't. And as for my grandma, she wasn't able to come because she wasn't driving by that point. I can't remember if nobody would bring her or if she was feeling rather ill at the time. Regardless, it bothers me she wasn't there because she died a little over a year later. It's really one of my aunts from out of state who made my cousin's graduation a big deal. I don't know what happened, we weren't invited, but he had all 4 of my aunts go, as well as my grandma. My other 3 aunts are great. This one just wants to act all big and important to my uncle. To those saying it doesn't matter, no, I guess it doesn't. But as someone who didn't really do sports or have any big celebrations when I was younger, this matters to me. I was 18, and at 18, sometimes small things really matter to you, especially when all your friends have their extended family show for their graduation, and you look like the odd one out. Am I thinking about it all the time? No. This Ask Reddit asked for something you're still salty about, and this is something that I'm still salty about. Story 18. I used to work for a pretty evil tech company in tech support. I was miserable only because I couldn't seem to get promoted. I got an offer at a place only 10 minutes from my house. Same pay, free parking, and happiness. I put my 2 weeks' notice in at my current job, and they were suddenly falling all over themselves to give me the promotion I had wanted, specializing in web tracking software, which I was really good at. I agreed to stay on if they would promote me to that position. I was young and naive, of course. I declined the other job offer, and then they denied me the promotion after I jumped through a bunch of hoops to qualify for it. I rage walked out of work. Story 19. When I was 14, I was reading my favorite trilogy, which is sold as a trilogy, but I know it's an epic in 6 volumes, The Lord of the Rings. My dad had bought me the 3-in-1 omnibus book from his online book club, and I absolutely loved it. So, as a 14-year-old redheaded girl, I lugged this huge book around all day at school to read in my spare time, and decided to leave it at my lunch table as I normally did. I left my books and things to get in line to buy my lunch, and when I came back, someone had smashed French fries into the middle of my precious LOTR book. I was devastated, absolutely devastated. I asked people nearby if anyone had seen who did this heinous act of violence against my beautiful book, but no one owned up to it. I silently cried pretty much the whole lunch hour while I was eating. I'm still sad and angry about that day, even though my dad was good enough to buy me a replacement. Story 20. In elementary school, I drew a picture of a dolphin with its blowhole spitting water out of it. My teacher was completely sure that they didn't have any holes and shamed me in front of the class. I had seen a lot of National Geographic documentaries and knew that dolphins were mammals and needed to breathe. To this day, I'm angry about it. Story 21. When I was at school, there was a private outside area that only the oldest kids could get into. This was great because we could play football or soccer for Americans without worrying about accidentally kicking a ball into a 5-year-old's face. There was also a teaching assistant who was a bit unpleasant and smelled of perfume considered disgustingly cheap. She constantly chewed gum, which was not allowed, and blamed us for the gum on the floor. This TA had a son who was a few years younger than me and also the most spoiled child I had ever met. At the beginning of the school year, I was excited to be able to have a private place to go during lunchtime, but to my dismay, I found the little brat and all his friends sitting there. Apparently, it was unfair that some people were given special treatment based on their age. Eventually, we were all kicked out because the young kids, one in particular, no points for guessing who, had been fighting and littering. Story 22. During a flag football championship in a league I played in when I was 12, my team was the only one with actual talent and a shot at beating the stacked team coached by the league owner, who got to choose players before handing them to the other coaches. In the championship game, we were winning by 4 late in the game, and the other team was driving down the field. They got to the goal line and called a timeout, but the ref said that there were only a couple of seconds left, so this was the last play. The quarterback did a QB sneak and then pitched the ball forward to a receiver after crossing the line of scrimmage, which is an illegal forward pass. The owner's brother, who was one of the refs, called it a touchdown, but the volunteer ref threw a flag and said it was an illegal pass. An argument ensued, and the owner ended it by saying, "One thing we can come away with in this is that we are all winners. Both teams were given first-place trophies, but ours had the first replaced with a second. Even after 15 years, I still remember that." Story 23. During a 5th grade kickball game, I was wrongfully called out because a kid was blocking the base. Now we work for the same company in different departments, and I can't help but give him the side eye when I see him in the hallway. I'm 40. Story 24. When I was in 5th grade, I sold candles door to door to cover the cost of joining one of the local rec football teams. We could either sell $150 worth of candles or pay $75 straight up. One of the team dads donated a brand new gas grill from his company to whoever sold the most candles. I was determined to get that grill and sell it for $200+. I hustled hard and sold around $450 in candles, which was about $150 to $200 more than the second-place person. Won the grill. My parents would not let me sell the grill on Craigslist, basically forced me to sell it to them for $50. It felt like robbery. Story 25. In 4th grade, we had a multiplication math test. I knew my stuff, so I was confident in 100%. I got it back with a 99%. The only one I got wrong was 6 times 4. I knew it was 24, but there was the ever so slightest line from my pencil that made my 4 look like a 6. God damn, I wanted that 100%. It's been 25 years, and I still think about that on occasion.